Afternoon, class. My name is Abubakar Adosama, and the image that you see before you has to do with Walter McMillan, a black man who was found guilty and condemned to death for the murder of a young white woman working as a clerk in a dry cleaning company in Moorville, Alabama. Before being convicted and sentenced to death, Mr. McMillan was detained on death row. His trial lasted only 1.5 days. Mr. McMillan was testified against by 3 witnesses, and the jury ignored multiple alibi witnesses. All of one were black and claimed that he was at a church fish fry at the time of the incident. Mr. McMillan was condemned to death when the charges were overruled. The jury sentenced the when the jury sentenced him to life in prison. Now sit back and imagine if you were convicted for a crime that you did not commit, actually, and even though the evidence shows that you didn't commit it, the fact that you belong to a certain social group could influence certain convictions in the social justice group. It makes no sense to know that you can possibly face the death penalty just because of who you are or just for being at the wrong place at the wrong time. This goes into my argument saying that the death penalty is inhumane. It affects main groups of people, and it is not really an effective method of corrections to be held in our justice system. For starters, the procedures of the death penalty do not always go as smoothly. In the United States, research shows that 3% of executions between 1890 and 2010 were actually botched. This means that people who were going through a procedure, whether they were sitting in a chair, whatever the process for death was, whether it was lethal injection or the electric chair, which is no longer with us anymore. Imagine you're going through this procedure and it doesn't go as smoothly as it's supposed to. It can often cause pain and trauma mentally and physically to the victim who is receiving the death penalty. And imagine knowing that even though you escaped death the first time, you would still have to go through it again. This seems very inhumane and immoral to have to be input into our justice system. Secondly, the death penalty, as I said, affects main groups of people, just as it was shown with Walter McMillan. African Americans make up most of the death penalty. And even though racial groups make up for 13% of the population, Black people make up for at least 40% of the people with death penalties. This could either mean that they're trying to say that people of color make up actually commit more crimes, which there is no correlation between race and crime. And it makes no sense as to why 13 out of 100% could accumulate for so much of the death penalties to the point where they make up for 40% of the death penalty rates when there are millions and millions of people who are in jail. It is unsafe to know that just because you are a person of color, you can be targeted by the justice system. Also, Black people are 4 to 5 times more likely to be arrested than white people. As a person who is Black, or even as a person who is a person of color, it is scary knowing that you can face certain punishments just for being a part of a social group or a race. Even though there's probably no way to change these inconsistencies within the justice system, I feel like it is more safe for people to know that abolishing the death penalty will give people a relief knowing that even if they were convicted of such dangerous crimes, whether they did it or not, that they could remain alive and live their life instead of facing the death penalty. The justice system isn't always going to be 100% correct, so it's better to make a mistake that will land somebody in jail than will result in someone potentially losing their life. Imagine having to lose your life, whether it's you or a friend or a father or a loved one, just for a crime that they potentially did not commit. just as what sort of happened to, well, not what sort of, what almost happened to Walter McMillan. And last but not least, innocent people are often sentenced to death. Since 1974, more than 156 people have been released from death row in 2016 in 26 states due to innocence. And for each one person that is exonerated, there are at least 10 people who were executed. Now sit back and think about this. Whether you are guilty or not, due to these statistics, these show that there is a very low chance of you being released from death row due to the type of accusations that have to be, or charges that have to be placed on you to be on death row. Now, this can be very scary for people of innocence, people who are targeted of crime due to whatever social group or race that they are in or participate in. So, like I say, it is best for us to abolish the death penalty so that way people wouldn't have to even face these scares. And it's better to make mistakes that can allow people to go to jail, at least whether they're guilty or not. It gives them time for rehabilitation or even gives them time to possibly fight the charges against them and possibly change and be allowed back in society eventually. Mm-mm. In conclusion, as I said, the death penalty should be abolished due to the fact that it is inhumane. The processes never go by as smoothly. It targets and affects main people of color. And last but not least, there are inconsistencies in people being sentenced to death row, whether they are innocent and they're exonerated or executed. Thank you.